What if the most powerful healing substance on the planet wasn't in the pharmacy or hospitals, but sitting quietly in your kitchen, functional and powerful, doing the work that a pill fundamentally can't touch? In part 1, we uncovered the first 6 ancient superfoods that act as the foundation for a resilient gut. But we've only just scratched the surface. The 14 foods we are covering today are different. Some of them are common items you've seen your whole life, but have been taught to eat completely wrong. Others are so potent that ancient cultures didn't even view them as food. They viewed them as medicine. We're going to look at a drink that acts like a reset button for your liver, a fermented root that cleanses your blood, and eventually the single most powerful probiotic ever discovered by science. If you're ready to move past basic nutrition and start using your kitchen as your primary pharmacy, let's pick up exactly where we left off. And number 7, prepare yourself, because this one dismantles a misconception that the industrial food system has spent decades reinforcing. Number 7, raw-aged cheese. The probiotic food hiding in plain sight, stripped of its identity by an industry that replaced it with something that only looks the same. Cheese is fermented food. This is the foundational fact that the modern dairy industry has successfully obscured, primarily because the process of making cheese shelf-stable, uniform, and commercially scalable requires eliminating the very biological activity that makes genuine aged cheese therapeutically remarkable. Properly crafted raw milk cheese, aged through months or years in controlled environments, is a living microbial ecosystem. The bacterial cultures present in authentic aged varieties do not simply reside on the surface. They penetrate the cheese matrix, remain biologically active throughout the aging process, and reach the gut alive in meaningful concentrations. Research on traditionally aged raw milk cheeses has identified active populations of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species, the same families at the center of clinical probiotic research, surviving in counts that place genuine aged cheese firmly in the category of functional fermented food. But the therapeutic profile extends well beyond probiotic delivery. The aging process generates short-chain fatty acids, butyrate most significantly, that serve as the primary fuel source for colonocytes, the specialized cells that line and maintain the integrity of the colon wall. Adequate butyrate supply is foundational to intestinal barrier function. When that barrier weakens, the downstream consequences touch nearly every system in the body. Authentic aged cheese supports that barrier from within. It is also among the most concentrated dietary sources of vitamin K2 in the negative 7 Malawian Quatches form, the most biologically active and long-lasting variety, which governs the critical metabolic function of directing calcium away from arterial tissue and toward bone. The cardiovascular implications of chronic K2 insufficiency are now considered significant in the clinical literature. Traditional aged cheese supplies what most modern diets are quietly missing. The distinguishing criterion is unambiguous: raw and aged. Not pasteurized, not processed, not marketed as natural while having undergone industrial treatment that eliminated every living organism within it. Genuine raw milk aged cheeses from small-scale producers, or traditionally made imported European varieties with full traceability, are the standard to seek. Practical protocol: 1 to 2 ounces as a component of a meal, precisely as European food culture has always positioned it. Not a main course. A deliberate, concentrated, purposeful addition. Small in volume, substantial in effect. Number 8. Sourdough bread. Not the impersonation sold at most bakeries. The original. The one that transforms itself before it ever transforms you. What most people understand as sourdough is, in the overwhelming majority of cases, commercially produced bread that has been flavored with vinegar or citric acid to approximate the taste of the real thing. Real sourdough contains no commercial yeast. It is leavened exclusively by wild yeast and lactobacillus bacteria, a culture maintained across days, weeks, or years, and it undergoes a fermentation period of at minimum 8 to 12 hours, and in traditional practice, frequently 24 to 48. That extended fermentation window is not a waiting period. is a transformation. During those hours, the lactobacillus bacteria systematically consume the rapidly digestible sugars in the flour. The same sugars that drive the blood sugar spikes associated with conventional bread consumption. They produce organic acids that lower the dough's pH and activate phytase, an enzyme that degrades phytic acid and unlocks the minerals, zinc, iron, magnesium, that wheat otherwise binds and withholds from absorption. And they partially hydrolyze the gluten proteins, rendering them structurally altered and significantly more manageable for the human digestive system. Clinical comparisons between genuine long-fermented sourdough and standard commercially yeasted bread show measurably lower glycemic responses, superior mineral bioavailability, and improved tolerability in individuals who report sensitivity to conventional wheat products. A subset of people diagnosed with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, a growing population, report tolerating properly fermented sourdough without triggering the symptoms that ordinary bread reliably produces. The grain itself has not changed. The fermentation changes what the grain becomes. This is the bread that sustained ancient civilizations. Heavy, dense, made from whole milled grain, fermented through the night in a covered vessel. The product in the plastic bag with the 3-week expiration date is not an evolution of that bread. It is a replacement, engineered for industrial logistics, not for human biology. Practical protocol. Baked at home from whole grain flour in a living starter culture maintained with regular feeding. Sliced thick. Toasted until the crust develops color and character. Topped with quality fats, fermented spreads, or simply olive oil and salt. Eaten slowly, without distraction. It was designed to be taken seriously. Number 9. Kvass. The circulatory tonic from Eastern Europe that the rest of the world quietly passed over, and almost certainly should not have. Most people in the Western world have never encountered kvass in any form. That unfamiliarity represents a genuine gap in the popular fermentation conversation, because what this beverage does for blood health, liver function, and circulatory capacity is supported by a body of evidence that makes the oversight genuinely difficult to justify. Kvass is a traditional fermented drink with deep roots across Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and the broader Slavic world, where it has been consumed medicinally and daily for centuries. Its 2 primary forms are biochemically distinct. Bread kvass, the original preparation, is produced by fermenting rye bread crusts in water, yielding a mildly tart, very low-alcohol probiotic drink with a characteristic mineral depth of dark rye fermentation. Beet kvass is the more therapeutically concentrated version. Raw beets fermented in salted water, producing a preparation that functions as something closer to a targeted clinical intervention than a simple beverage. In beet kvass, the fermentation process performs 2 simultaneous operations of cardiovascular significance. It concentrates the betalains, the vivid red-violet pigments native to beets, with established antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, while also increasing the bioavailability of the beet's natural nitrates. Those nitrates, once absorbed, are converted to nitric oxide in the bloodstream, a vasodilator that relaxes and expands blood vessel walls, measurably improving circulation and reducing blood pressure. Lactobacillus fermentation then adds a probiotic dimension and further amplifies the bioavailability of the beet's native compounds. Across generations of Eastern European traditional medicine, beet kvass was prescribed for liver congestion, poor circulation, sluggish digestion, and iron deficiency states. Modern investigation of the compounds it contains, betaine, betalains, organic acids, and active bacterial cultures, has validated each of those traditional clinical applications with corresponding biochemical mechanisms. Practical protocol: 4 ounces before meals as a dedicated digestive and circulatory primer. The flavor profile, deeply earthy, mineralic, and sharply sour, is confronting on first encounter. Most people who commit to it for 2 weeks report that the flavor recedes from awareness long before the physiological effects do. What comes next takes us deeper still, into a fermentation tradition so ancient and so geographically specific that most people have never considered it as anything other than a condiment. Number 10 changes that entirely. Number 10. Lacto-fermented pickles. The most misrepresented food in the fermented category. And the distinction between the real thing and its impersonator may be the single most consequential label reading lesson you ever learn. Walk down the condiment aisle of any grocery store and you will find shelves lined with jars bearing the word pickle. What fills the overwhelming majority of those jars is cucumber preserved in distilled vinegar, a fast, inexpensive industrial process that produces shelf stability and a convincing approximation of the flavor profile. But no fermentation occurred. No bacterial culture developed. No living organism survived to reach your gut. The acidity is chemical, injected rather than generated. This is not a minor distinction. These two products share a name and a visual identity, and that is where the similarity ends. Authentic lacto-fermented pickles require nothing beyond cucumbers, water, salt, and time. The salt brine creates a selective environment in which lactobacillus bacteria, naturally present on the cucumber skin, are the only organisms that can thrive. They consume available sugars, produce lactic acid as their metabolic signature, and in doing so preserve the cucumber through a process that simultaneously generates active enzymes, organic acids, and live bacterial cultures that remain viable through consumption and reach the intestinal environment intact. This preparation has been central to food culture across Eastern Europe, the Levant, and throughout Asia for thousands of years. Employed specifically as a digestive aid, a recovery food after illness, and an immune support staple during harsh seasons. There is also a specific physiological phenomenon associated with fermented pickle brine, one that caught researchers off guard when athletes began reporting near-instantaneous relief from exercise-induced muscle cramping after consuming it. Investigation revealed the mechanism is not simple electrolyte replacement, which operates too slowly to explain the speed of the effect. Current evidence points to a neural reflex response triggered by the acetic compounds in the brine acting on receptors in the oropharyngeal region, a response that inhibits the misfiring motor neurons responsible for cramping within seconds of ingestion. Traditional athletes didn't know the mechanism. They knew it worked. Practical protocol: 3 to 5 spears or a generous portion of slices alongside meals, several times weekly. The brine carries the same therapeutic density as the cucumber itself. Do not discard it. And read every label with precision. Vinegar as an ingredient disqualifies the product entirely. If it has a weeks-long shelf life at room temperature, it is not what you're looking for. The real thing is cold, alive, and slightly effervescent when opened. Number 11. Tempeh. The fermentation process that solves soy and produces something the unfermented version never could. Unfermented soy occupies a genuinely complicated position in nutritional science. It contains phytoestrogens, phytic acid in quantities sufficient to substantially impair mineral absorption, and protease inhibitors that interfere with protein digestion. The populations throughout East and Southeast Asia who have consumed soy for millennia without the chronic hormonal and digestive disruptions that some contemporary research has associated with Western soy consumption share one defining variable: they fermented it. Tempeh is the most complete expression of that fermentation principle. Originating in Indonesia and consumed there as a daily dietary staple for centuries, is produced by fermenting whole-cooked soybeans with Rhizopus oligosporus, a mold that binds the beans into a dense, firm cake, while executing a biochemical transformation of the source material so thorough that the finished product is essentially a different food. Phytic acid is degraded to a fraction of its original concentration, unlocking the zinc, iron, and calcium that the raw soybean withholds. Protease inhibitors are neutralized, allowing the protein to be properly digested and utilized. The phytoestrogens are metabolized into isoflavone forms that emerging research characterizes as potentially protective against hormone-dependent cancers rather than problematic, a reversal of the concern that unfermented soy raises. What remains after this fermentation is one of the most nutritionally complete plant-derived protein sources in the documented nutritional record: 30 grams of complete protein per cup, containing all essential amino acids in clinically relevant amounts. Vitamin B12, extraordinarily rare in plant foods, is present in meaningful concentrations. The rhizopus fermentation additionally produces natural antimicrobial compounds as part of the mold's own biological defense system. Secondary metabolites that have demonstrated measurable antimicrobial activity in laboratory research. Practical protocol: sliced and seared in coconut oil until the exterior develops a golden crust, or marinated and grilled with bold seasoning. Tempeh absorbs flavor with unusual aggression. It rewards assertive preparation. Its dense, slightly chewy texture provides satiety that most plant proteins are constitutionally incapable of delivering. That brings us to number 11 on our list. We've covered some incredible healing foods today, but we are only halfway through this journey. In the next video, we are moving into some of the most powerful plant-based ferments ever discovered. I'm splitting this deep dive so you can actually digest this information and start looking for these first 11 foods this week. When we return, we'll finish the list and reveal the single most powerful probiotic food on the planet. If you're ready to reclaim your health using ancient wisdom, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the conclusion. I'll see you in part 3.